I'm going to introduce this next one because I'm excited about ID Invaded. This is a new psychological thriller detective show from director A. Aoki and writer fucking Maijo Otaro, who is one of the most insane, off-the-rails light novel authors that there is. Everything he's written is possibly the craziest thing I've ever read in my life. So I'm extremely excited that he has started writing anime. He wrote The Dragon Dentist a couple years ago, I guess. I still haven't seen that, though.
That thing.
But he's writing this now, and just everything about this story instantly clicked with me. This is one of those things where I was like, it feels like it was made with me in mind, because it's about... It starts off, well, I kind of don't even want to spoil it. Like, I don't want to describe too much of the plot. I would encourage you to watch this episode just not knowing, only because the way the episode begins, you're kind of you're in with the main character having no idea what the fuck's going on. Yeah. And the way that information is unraveled is very interesting across the episode, because you're constantly like broadening your perspective on exactly what's going on, pretty much right to the end. And it does a amazing job of holding off on any exposition that doesn't need to be known at this time to understand this moment, and then explaining that shit later, now that you're curious about it, because you already had an enjoyable time with this thriller episode. So, like, the structure in that sense is, like, one of the best things about this.
Digi, while I do agree with that assessment, it doesn't, like, it is structured in, like, a mystery sense of slowly unraveling what you need to know as it goes on. Did anybody else find it absolutely obnoxious, the frequent cuts to, like, the crew as they, like, comment at great length about every little fucking action that the main character is doing?
That was the best fucking part.
That's when I dropped it.
That's when he dropped it, Digi. That's when he dropped it. No, it sucked.
That's when I
dropped
was
it.
Shit. I was falling asleep during this.
You guys didn't... Wait... I fucking loved this show.
To be clear, I did not hate the
like
show. I just didn't like those cuts. That's what I
was not a fan, but I like the design of the main guy, but I was not really much of a fan.
He's a fucking fairy tale Natsu looking motherfucker, but
he looks better than Natsu. He looks a little bit better.
True. That's true.
How were you not immediately sucked in by the arm thing?
I was way into that.
The Rayman thing, I was like, that's funny. That's Rayman.
This is not Rayman. This is full. This is max potential awakened devil fruit Buggy the Clown. That's what's happening here.
Oh my, it is Buggy,
and it was based as fuck, and I absolutely loved it.
I might need to watch it again just to watch Buggy. Yeah.
I loved those effects, and I noticed like the you can see like characters. Okay, so characters like split apart at least in one of these worlds, and you'll see animations of when they turn, all the pieces don't quite turn in sync. They're a little bit like desynced sometimes, or they like follow a pattern. All those details I loved and I thought were fantastic. Yeah. But like when it gets to the like, oh guys, we're doing like a I got some Psychopaths vibes. Like we have like a detector, we can like detect will to kill, and like we can use it to track down serial killers, bro, and we can literally use their like we find the particles of their willingness to commit crimes or whatever, and we can invade their minds with our mind machine.
That's my main problem.
Come on.
Yeah, pretty much.
You have to accept this baseline in order to get this show, though.
I do accept it. I do accept it, and I don't even dislike it. But
I mean, look, I will say, I think that the plot, the idea of this show is retarded, because what the idea is
any idea can be good depending on how it's
done. The idea of this show is that it's basically about trying to capture serial killers, and apparently serial killers, they have some kind of unique attribute that nobody else has about the way their brain is. I don't know if this is true or not, incidentally. I have not done the neuroscience research, but they have built a lot of technology out of that unique element of the serial killer brain.
I can believe that. That's fine. That's the premise.
They can detect the brain through like a literal like scouter. They can like find you by measuring your intent to kill. There's also, but for whatever reason, only people with intent to kill, because of the fact that they have this thing in their brain, which I guess is not an innate property of the brain, but more something that is released by your brain.
It
like,
seems to
your
be some
brain
sort
is
of like
releasing
I
mythical
think you just like
particle.
shows with brains.
They literally say
It's
at one
true.
point that like these particles can be carried on the wind. What the
Yeah.
fuck does that? I don't know.
It's
So
I didn't even get to that part. That's awesome.
There's
Look,
there's
I
one
don't
of
know.
these
This
obnoxious.
might be real. For,
It's
as far
not
as
real,
fucking I
Digi.
know.
Come on.
There's one of these
He's a
murder mystery
neuroscientist,
shows.
Nate. All right.
all right.
There's one of these murder mystery shows like almost every season or the second season, and it just seems to me like everyone is trying to invent more ridiculous like exposition and ways that the world works, and it's just like exactly what you were talking about, Nate. Like, oh, it's this can track the brain and the. Shut up. This doesn't make
No,
sense.
it's not about making sense though. It's just that this conceit has to exist for this show to happen.
That's fine.
it's-
There's no problem with
it's
that.
just this there if you have intent to kill, your brain releases a chemical or something that they can trace, and also if that chemical is in your brain, then they have a machine that will allow a man to I guess
Go
like
in your-
virtual reality into your id.
Yep.
So
Yep.
so that's id invaded. That's the show.
That's what happens.
That's the
So-
idea.
Yep.
You
I'm just gonna tell you why I didn't find that enjoyable. What you were talking about, I get it, but I would think for a mystery, a big like appeal of it is the audience engagement of like you following the thing as the detective is following it, fucking taking clues and trying to solve them with it, with the detective or like whatever. You know, you're in there. Here,
Yeah.
there's a bunch of like shit that they just make up, a bunch of like obnoxious rules that don't make sense. Things get solved way too quick, and I just didn't find it.
Yeah, I
engaging
must say there were
personally.
many times I was way ahead of our genius detective in like the deductions he was trying to make, which was a little strained credibility. I mean, there are other things like the fact that like where the guy was hiding in the mind. I mean, that was kind of cool. That was an interesting deduction.
That was
Things like
sick,
that I
dude.
enjoyed. Yeah, that was good. That was good.
I mean, I was so. First of all, the way this episode starts is just the main character.
start
like,
is amazing.
floating
I
on
loved
a
the start of
platform
this.
in a void.
Yeah, it was great.
Surrounded by weird shit. He doesn't know who he is, and like just the idea that like once we do understand what's going on,
Yeah.
like it is the coolest idea for a detective imaginable. Like he literally just shows up in somebody's mind with no idea who he is or where he is. Just like, I don't know why I'm here. What the fuck's going on? But then he will see the corpse of this girl who, for some reason, recurs in every serial killer's mind. Anybody with intent to kill has an image of this girl in their mind. And when he sees her, because of the fact that she reminds him, as we later learn, of his dead daughter.
Yep.
Which I figured was going to be the case pretty quickly. But, like, something to that effect, at least. When he sees her, it like makes him realize that he's supposed to be solving her murder, and solving her murder within this person's mind is how we will ultimately triangulate where that person is IRL. So that's basically what it is. It's a super weird idea, but just the thought of what's possible with main character wakes up in person's mind with no idea who they are or why they're there. You can do anything with that.
The possibilities that opens are indeed good, and I love a lot of the like tangible details, like the fact that they choose to represent like the minds of killers with a consistently like Kairu, the same girl murder victim that has a murder to be solved. Like, that is a very fascinating idea. And, like, the larger plot going on here of pursuit of this, like, mysterious character that they didn't even know if they was real, who seems to manifest in all these serial killers, John Walker. But then,
and
like...
now we've confirmed that he is
a real guy, and now
episode,
is the... And he seems to be creating these serial killers, which is interesting.
And he's awesome, because it's like this weird old dude who's, like this Santa Claus-looking motherfucker who I guess somehow influences... So I guess he's like our Makishima in Psycho-Pass comparison. I mean, this show is, as I put it on Twitter, Psychonauts by way of Psycho-Pass. It's cool, fucking imaginative inner worlds that have a logic.
But you know what Psycho-Pass had? Psycho-Pass broke up things with like comedy and lightheartedness. This breaks up the
Psychonauts.
Psychonauts. I'm talking about Psychonauts. That's what I meant to say. Whereas this show breaks things up with extended dialogue sequences from characters characters we don't know or care about that are restating facts we already learned and are making deductions that we as the audience could not follow because they're just saying like, oh, he did X thing in this brain. That revealed
they're
Y
supernatural.
totally unrelated piece of information that we now know and could use to track this thing down. Like the connections here, there's a lot of surface level shit going on in here. They're just throwing around words like id and photon particles, and I mean a lot of it's a bunch of techno jargon. Can you do cool stuff
I thought
with it?
that
Yes.
stuff was. I love retarded techno jargon. Like I think that is inherently fun and hilarious. Like
So
to
did
me
you-
the appeal, like this was very similar to Be the Beginning in this way, where they have all these computers that could do just ridiculous shit. So like the second that they like, there's a scene where in very rapid succession they analyze like a picture that was in the mind, and they're like, okay, well, like all we can see is like a face and the wall behind him. However, like that wall is this distance and it must be a basement for these reasons, and therefore
That's
like
fine.
let's
That's
run
all
through the
good.
computer of every basement in the city, and like it can instantly do all that because the technology is so good. It's just like this rapid fire of like all these little and analyzing this, and then we fucking ran that through this computer, and you see all these 3D graphs. and shit.
Okay,
Yeah,
listen. The problem with this is nothing to do with the premise or the machinery they have. It's purely how they put their dialogue in as exposition and how they move the story along. And I compare it to something
I
like
was never
just-
bored
all right,
watching this show.
Okay,
I was
well, that's
like on
fine.
the edge of my seat.
I was
start to
utterly
finish.
confused and thought this was weird and not making a lot of sense. And I think of something like Ghost in the Shell. It's like Ghost in
Have
the
you
Shell.
considered the possibility that you might need to have a higher IQ to appreciate?
Yeah, you know,
dude.
I'll run that through the machine and see if that
this
does
show,
it. But when I
for me, felt pretty thematic.
When I compare this to something like Ghost in the Shell for like Standalone Complex or whatever, it's like the premise of that world is this richly realized, like totally understandable usage of like cybernetic technology that could exist and does theoretically make sense. Even if it could never exist, we understand the rules behind it, and we can like play along. I don't understand
that's a
these rules,
sci-fi
and I
show.
can't play along in this show.
It's rooted in the like concepts that we know. So even though it's like different and we don't have that technology, the conceptual understanding of the technology is there.
Exactly. There's got to be a term for this in writing, but I can't think of what it is right now.
I mean, I think I love shows that are like that, but that is a very limiting view of like what could be done with a sci-fi.
I'm just
show,
saying,
you know?
don't make your
Why
plot
not make up some
nonsensical and
crazy
bullshit,
shit?
and that's what the show was doing.
What is not? There's nothing nonsensical about the show. It all made sense. It all flowed from each other. Like by the end, they wrap up every loose end. I had no.
It's not about
questions
the
left.
loose ends.
I
It's
think
about the
this
way
is-
they give information out, and the way they lead us from one point to the next as the story goes along.
I don't understand what was. I did not feel whatever you're describing as this.
Jack,
problem.
what did you
I
think?
don't-
What do you think about it?
I know. I think I mostly agree with you.
Based.
I wasn't totally grabbed by the premise, but like, it was definitely the exposition that made me really bored throughout it. I don't know. I like as I think Nate was comparing it to Psychonauts and Psychopaths, but like both things that I like, but like I don't know.
I'm curious how you guys felt about this moment.
Okay,
Because
okay.
there's a moment early on where, you know, we start off inside of the head. This guy's learning about his fucking arm. It's sick. It's like a video game.
It is.
First of all, they need to make a video game based on this show. They need to. It would be so much fun.
That would
like
be
it.
more
It'd be
fun.
fucking
It
sick.
exists. It's called Control.
I wish this
came out
show was
last year.
more about the things he can do with his wacky, stretchy arm. That would be better.
Or just whatever he can do in any world.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, that's
you know,
true.
If this was like Psychonauts, it would be, you know, new world, new abilities
power or
every
something.
time.
Yeah.
Which is pretty much the same, but like, you know, doing it with like a mystery detective thriller. would
I don't
also
know
be
why,
cool.
but while I was watching it, I definitely was thinking of you, Digi. I think this is like very much your type of show. When I was watching it, I got that feeling. And I would personally love for you to make any like video analysis on this.
I mean, I'd have to know. Obviously, there's not that, like you said, there's not that much theming in this episode yet. I don't know what the deeper themes of the show are going to be yet, like, because I'm sure they'll be there.
It's all
And,
going
like,
to be about
it
the
just
main
seems
character.
that, like you
who's-
have
yeah.
a greater perspective on it for some
Well,
reason.
okay.
That's how I feel.
Like an
There's a
appreciation
reason.
for
There's
it,
a good
yeah.
reason for that, and it has to do with the staff, as I mentioned earlier, because the writer Maija Otaro, like I said, everything he's written is fucking absolutely insane. And like, it's funny because there's a heavy amount of reference in this episode, Under the Surface, of the drilling the holes in the brain.
Right,
because Maijo Otaro has a story called Drill Hole in My Brain, which is about the story is the main character gets a drill goes into his brain, and then we go into his psyche, and it's just a fucking total insane clusterfuck. Like it's just a weird stream of consciousness inside this guy's psyche as he's dying, you know, and like all of his emotions and understandings of the world are swirling together, and he's like living inside of a cliche anime, but then he becomes a vagina, and like all this crazy shit happens. So like it's like hypersexual. All his stories his stories are hypersexual, full of constant swearing. So it's basically, you know, perfect for me. Like he writes in the way that I think. So but this show is way more orderly. Like his other stuff is all like out of control, stream of consciousness madness. So like seeing that he even could write a show that was like tight and where it had more of that like mystery thriller feel to it was like, man, I'm really excited to see like how this is going to get weird. You know, like clearly we've had to set up a lot of shit in this episode, but we don't have to set all that shit up anymore. So there's plenty of space, and I'm going to assume that they're going to do 2-episode arcs for each mystery, since that's what we did here. So I'm thinking probably, you know, across 2 episodes, you can get pretty deep into the psyche, you know, and I'm curious to know what kind of adventures we'll go on. It was also interesting learning about the characters and stuff, but I also have faith in the director, Ei Aoki, who directed Fate Zero and Ga Ray Zero and Aldenoa Zero. He really likes his zeros, but he also did the first, and he did the first Kara no Kyokai film, which is one of my favorites. But generally his shows do tend to have lots of giant exposition dumps and him trying to find a way to make it visually interesting. Sometimes he succeeds, sometimes he does not. Recreators was nothing but expo dumps all the fucking time. It got old. But ID Invaded, like, there's this one moment where you're down in the mind with the guy, and then the camera literally pulls out, and we reveal that he's inside of like this reality marble, basically. And then we pull out to like this sci-fi, police room, basically, this home base. And there's all these people commenting on what's going on inside the thought bubble. And then the camera pulls back again up even higher into the rafters of the same building. And we're like, we meet the little girl and these other characters. And so it gave me this feeling of like, we went from literally having no fucking idea what's going on to now understanding that there's like 3 layers of what's happening in this plot. And then from that point, each of those layers is fleshed out and they intertwine and they all come together in the end, you know? So like that feeling of that broadening of scope of going from like literally I have no fucking idea what is happening to like, okay, I guess now we're in like a sci-fi world and he's in a machine and these are like cops or something. Okay, now we know that they're going out, like they're trying to hunt the guy in the real world and this is all connected. And like, so it just keeps getting more complex. But I never had trouble following it personally. I was always just like trying to keep track of, okay, so we've got the girl's corpse. What does that mean? What is this going to mean? You know? And then at the end, like the plot wraps up and then there's probably a good like 6 or 7 minutes at the end of the episode of just like getting all the exposition that we weren't entirely clear about out of the way. Cause there's some things that you kind of assume, but you're not sure. So it might be, yes, they are repeating something you already know to some degree, but they're stating it in a different way with new information, like it's not just, I'm literally describing what you did. It's like, it's worked into a conversation that gives us a broader sense of what was going on. So, we're always learning something new. We always get a little bit, like for instance, at the very end of the episode, we learned that the main guy's daughter had died. I assumed that the corpse, because he recognized it, as soon as he saw it, that it was related to him in some way. And then eventually we learned that it just appears in every killer's mind. But all the time he seemed to have this weirdly more personal connection. Like he cared more. And then we find out he had a daughter and it's like, okay, well, she probably got murdered and, he sees that in her. Maybe he murdered her because he can only access the system because he is himself a killer. So our main character clearly has something fucked up with him. And like it's also interesting that he doesn't seem to be like the same person as the person he is in the memories. Like in the real world, he's just this fucking asshole. But like when he goes into the mind, he can be this super detective. And like he almost seems to look up to that version of himself that he cannot be without the inability to remember who he is. You know,
I feel like
so
it's more like he's looking back to the man he used to be, but similar.
I think he's lost. I think it's kind of a metaphor for being lost in the sauce. Like he doesn't want to leave. He wants to keep going back in, and the guy who leads the program literally doesn't let him. He's like, no, you've overworked yourself. It's not good for your mental health. You're not going back. You know.
I don't think he likes being in his own mind very much. I think he not too big a fan of it. Yeah.
He'd rather be in someone else's mind, not thinking about himself. You know. So that's it's an interesting character, and it's also one that will drive the story very well because, you know, why is he continuing to do this? Like, what kind of fucking madman would do this? And there you go. So I don't know. I'm excited. I don't know if it will ultimately be deep, if the stories will always be interesting, if the animation quality will live up to the first episode. But I have high hopes. I want my next Psycho-Pass, you know?
Sure, and, understandable. I think most people do. I'm very glad that I think most of the main expositing is done, but I think we're set up for a lot of, like, okay, like, I was pretty much able to follow everything without any difficulty because it felt very obvious to me. And the things that I couldn't figure out were because they were intentionally left as part of, like, oh my god, it's so deep. Like, it's when he puts together the world, it's the holes that matter more than anything else. Oh, the guy drills holes in himself. It's, oh my god, it's like so connected. It all makes sense now.
I hate that.
Like, sure. Like, when I'm the author writing the story, I'm going back and I'm like using details like, okay, how do I depict this hint? Okay, this guy drills holes. Okay, I'll make it about like the holes and things. So look, that's fine. It's not a problem. I'm just not overly impressed by it knowing the end. And I suspect and fear a lot of writing in this vein coming up. That's like, you know, we are just a lot of characters restating psychological phenomenon that just isn't that interesting, is very surface level, and is all very obvious when you're looking back on it in retrospect. And I mean, this is I guess I have the negative view, whereas you have the more positive one. Who knows which one it'll ultimately be?
It could go that way, and I'll say that, like, I don't know if this is Maijo Otaro's attempt to be more commercial and less weird, you know? Nothing he's written up to this point that I've seen is anywhere remotely near as accessible as this. Like, not even in the same realm. So the fact that it's so toned down makes me think, like, maybe he's trying to, you know, maybe the reason that Drill Hole in My Brain guy is in episode 1 is just to be like, haha, you know, I'm the guy who writes the drill hole in the brains, but let's get serious now. You know, I don't know. Well, or maybe it'll go fucking totally nuts. That's what I'm hoping.
We'll have to see. And for the record, I've stated most of my criticisms. I liked a lot of things. Like, I thought that like little girl character was kind of, I don't know why she's like a field agent, but putting that aside,
eyebrows, I was very confused about how old is she supposed to be?
I do not know. But now that we've put that aside, like the fact that she is there and is like a bad enough dude to like be willing to drill her own fucking brain because she knows that's what the mission requires in order to like nail the bad guy. I was very impressed by her
by exhibiting the intent to kill on herself.
To kill herself.
She opened herself up.
Such a big brain. That was good. I thought that was clever. I enjoyed it. Yeah. And I really liked when they go into like he goes into that world and there is Kaoru who has committed suicide. I was like, hey, that's you know, that's a cute twist of the dead girl thing going on. Did I interrupt somebody? Man mode, were you saying something?
Yeah.
Whoops.
You cut me off. I was trying to do my thing.
Have at it.
Is ID invaded man mode? Tune in after I take a piss.
Okay, sounds good.
I have a question.
Do you guys all want to take a piss break? Because I also have to piss.
Sure. Well, Jack's here. I think Jack's saying something, but after that.
Does the guy keep his low Rayman arm the entire time, or is that only in that specific brain?
It seems contingent on that brain.
Because he didn't have it in the other brain, right?
Correct, he did not. He did not.
Right.
Okay.
If this was a video game, he would probably keep these powers as it goes between worlds. But alas, it is a lowly anime.
Sick.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a piss break
pause.
and reconvene.